Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, Mastering the Art of Fire Service Leadership,
where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now, here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matusik.
And Carrie Henderson. Thanks for joining.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Heat of Command podcast, Kyle and Carrie. Thank you to our faithful listeners who keep tuning in and sending us feedback. We love it. We took a couple weeks off because, life and everybody has stuff going on. We're excited to be back and have a fun episode in store, I think. I think it's a challenging episode and will make folks think. It definitely makes me think, and I don't quite know all the answers, of course, as we never do. But Kyle and I were talking today about how do I get this started? So I'm sure you've seen in your departments or in your life where you have good leaders and then they're trying to lead someone else that may be difficult, or they have a hard time, or maybe you personally have a hard time leading certain people. There's certain people in your life and you're like, they're just difficult to lead. And we want to talk today about why is that? What makes that happen? Is it, there's a book out there and I cannot remember what it's called. The theory is everyone is a leadership number. And if you're a 5, can you lead a 7? Or if you're an 8, can you only lead below you, or how that plays out? So is that a factor? Or is it some people are intimidating, and what makes them intimidating to you? And what makes it so you don't feel as confident leading them or giving them feedback as maybe you do for other people? And we just want to get into that and just have a conversation about what Kyle and I think may be going on behind that. And then lastly, I'd also like to talk about how do we make ourselves more leadable, or as Kyle says, a better follower, which makes a whole lot more sense to say it that way. But I want to be the kind of person that people feel comfortable leading and that they want me to be a part of their team because I'm a team player and I take feedback and criticism well. But what if I'm not? How do I know? And what can I do to be a better follower? So I'm excited.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to unpack, and we talk about this because I think in every area of the workplace, not just in the fire service, we see this. And I think it's important to start off with, when we look at the word leader, what we really mean by that, especially when we're looking at, people that are hard to lead or intimidating to lead, and how do we go around about that and give you some strategies to hopefully be able to overcome those obstacles first, and then as somebody who is being led, how to be a better follower to accept some of the leadership that's out there, which that in and of itself could be a challenge, especially, in our industry. So when we look at the word leader, for me, and, Carrie, add in what you think. For me, it's, there's always the Webster dictionary, someone that can influence and do things like that, and people want to listen to you and they trust you and things like that. And I think in our industry, there's different kinds of leadership depending on the environment that we find ourselves in, right? On an emergency scene, it's a very, in my opinion, authoritarian, like, this is what we're doing, go. There's not a lot of time for collaborations and meetings and things like that. Now, obviously, if it's a very involved incident, sure, we're going to collaborate and stuff. But your basic run-of-the-mill EMS call, fire call, whatever it is, you do this because I said so, right? There's a rank structure, and that's just the way things need to happen, right? Critical decisions, seconds matter. Let's go to work. Obviously, given, if there's safety concerns, that's a whole nother thing we don't need to get in. So that's one aspect of leadership, right? On the emergency scene, we do what we need to do. And then there's the other side where, we want to have influence on people, right? We want to teach people. We want to encourage people and motivate people. And so that's a completely different style of leadership. And I think this is the area where it's very challenging, especially in our culture today, where it's hard for people to understand, like, hey, how do I best do this? Especially as generations change. And I think that's where the trials come in, right? People are different than what they were 10 years ago. They'll be different 10 years from now. And our And we have to change our approach to lead people. And both are true in this, that you could be a young leader trying to lead older folks or motivate and encourage them or teach them. And that is very challenging because, right, just generational difference. So they could be hard to lead. Or B, maybe you're old school, you got 55 years on the job, the coolest mustache, you just look intimidating, and like, nobody's going to tell you anything. Like, you are completely unleadable just because of your mere presence, right? And I think we do see a lot of both those in our industry and across the culture, and it could make it a very challenging environment for learning how to motivate and empower people. When you think that's what you want to do, you just don't necessarily know how to do it as a leader. And then on the second end, how do I make myself less intimidating to accept criticism from other people? And I think that's the hardest part. Like, how do I become a good follower, especially if you're senior and somebody junior has a ranking position over you, right? How do you accept that? And, there's a lot to think about, and it's very challenging stuff, and it's going to require a lot of, we say these words like humility and being humble, but that's what it's going to take a lot of. So a lot to talk about here for sure.
Yeah. And I'm in a neat position as the training chief because I get to see all of the shifts. I get to see all the battalion chiefs, all the captains, all the firefighters come through, and I get to watch so many leadership interactions. I get to watch battalion chiefs give feedback to their captains give feedback to their firefighters. And so it's been this lesson in leadership to me because I watch some guys I know are super great leaders, and I can even see their discomfort sometimes when they have to give feedback to captains, or to battalions giving feedback to captains, and that's what I'm trying to figure out is the difficulty the person receiving the feedback, or is it's probably both, is that the leader giving the feedback is intimidated, or maybe isn't as strong a leader as the person they're giving feedback to, or is it something else? Is it something else entirely, or is it a combination of all those things? And it's been interesting to watch over my years in training, watch all that play out. And even for myself, and when I'm giving feedback to the crews, it's like, what captains and what battalions am I more comfortable giving feedback to? And when are the times when I'm a little unsure of myself, and what is the factor that's at play? And I think sometimes it's a confidence thing it's definitely a confidence thing for yourself, but does this person that I'm giving feedback to believe in me? Do they believe I know what I'm talking about? So I think a lot of times it's that, and it's the guys and girls that I know, like, know my abilities and believe I know what I'm talking about. Then I can very easily say this, and this, I try this different, great job on this, not so great on this. But it's the guys and girls that I know are skeptics of me that it's like, how do I deliver this message so that they understand I know what I'm talking about here, and they're receptive to the feedback I'm trying to give them. So I think that's part of it, a confidence thing. But I do think it's also on the person, right? It's the other person that you're giving feedback to. It's how are they normally? Like, if somebody normally is not receptive to any feedback, of course you're going to go into it like, how do I deliver this? Because they're never receptive. Do I deliver it the same way I deliver the message to everyone else who is receptive, or do I have to do something different? And should we do something different, right?
Yeah, I think we should break this down kind of into two ways, and we'll hit both of them. So first, like, you essentially are the person in the leadership role, let's just say, and we have somebody that's either hard to lead or intimidating to lead, and you hit on a bunch of stuff already behind all this, but what goes into that, and then how do we overcome that? And you hit on, I think, the number one thing, and I think it is a confidence thing in yourself, and it's just so interesting when we start talking about everything that we talk about when we talk about leadership, how so many things are intertwined with this, because this could go back to simply way back to when you were a kid and stuff happened and you never felt good enough, right? It could be something as simple as that, and that just sticks with you your entire life. And then you have somebody that you're trying to lead that brings you back to a time where you didn't feel good enough, and that you're filled with those feelings, and you might not necessarily understand why you're feeling like, why don't I feel good enough in this situation, or why am I having a hard time leading this person? You might not understand exactly why, and maybe we're here to try and tell you, like, there's something behind that. You need to listen to that and be self-reflective and be aware of that, because that's going to make you an effective leader. Like, hey, something's not right here. I don't feel as confident. Why is that? Having that strong mentor in your life that you can bring that to and be like, hey, I just had this scenario. It was weird. I wasn't very confident. Like, what? I don't know, and because there might be a lot of layers to that onion to peel back and figure out, why you don't feel good enough in that specific situation with that person. But I think confidence is definitely one of those big ones, and I think building confidence starts early on in your career from the people who lead you to begin with. So as you're getting built up as a junior firefighter and you have strong people in your corner, when you get promoted, sometimes that hopefully would be a seamless process, but sometimes you're kind of going at things on your own, figuring things out on your own, might not have that strong mentorship within your life. And then you get to this position of leadership and the confidence just isn't there. You might know you're right, but like, do they know that you're right? And all these thoughts and second guessing and all this stuff starts going on in your head. And I think that comes back to a valuable part of training. When we look at training, yes, it's the skills and the things that we have to do to do our job, but it's also for you as a leader to develop some of your strategies and fail there. And don't be afraid to fail and challenge that confidence and put things out there and, just go with what you think. And then they take that opportunity to learn from as well.
Yeah, that's so hard.
Yeah.
That's so hard to try that out, right? Because we're all trying to put our best self out there and to try stuff like that, and that's tough. That's super tough. Like I meet like once a month or so with a woman who's a lieutenant, and in theory, I'm her mentor. A lot of times I think she's more my mentor, but we just basically mentor each other at this point. But we were talking through some things that I was going to work on, and I told her what my plan was and stuff. She helped me brainstorm. And so this past week at the burn building, we were doing live fire training. I was gonna delegate some of the feedback. And I was like, I'm going to delegate that to the captain in training and let him give more of the feedback. Failed at that miserably. I told him in the morning, I want you to give more of the feedback today. And I totally sucked. Like, I could not do it. And I'm like, what is wrong with you, Carrie? Get yourself together. And I purposely wanted to delegate it on some of the days that I knew there were folks that are difficult to get feedback to. And it was almost like I didn't want him to fail. So I just did it instead. And which is a failure all the way around. But yeah.
It's cool you can recognize that, though, right? Like
Yeah.
I think that's the basis of growing as an effective leader, is doing things and being like, duh, I missed the mark on that. I should have done this, and I understand that. It's that constant evaluation of yourself. And I think when it comes to having someone hard to lead and you're the leader in that position, it's we've said numerous times, the self-awareness journey is like the most unselfish thing you can do. And it's having this awareness about yourself and your values and what you bring to the table, and then having confidence in that. And again, our culture is hard, like you said, to do that in sometimes, and to create this level of vulnerability in yourself in front of a group of people to try and improve yourself. Our culture doesn't really allow for that, which is unfortunate. And we need to kind of change that narrative a little bit to have environments that want to develop leaders, right? Because I've been in 15 years, and it's just crazy to me the lack of education and the lack of training that takes place to develop effective leaders. And we throw this term around like, oh, they're leaders. And you're like, no, they got a title. That's about it. So we create these environments where we allow people to fail, try their leadership strategy, have strong mentorship, and build their confidence. So no matter who gets put in front of them, they're going to be able to effectively lead them, whether it be on the fire ground because they have to listen to, or in the four walls of the firehouse when they're trying to motivate and encourage their crews to do whatever tasks need to be completed for the day or whatever training needs to be done for the day. And then what happens is, right, it becomes cyclical, right? So we finally kind of draw that line in the sand and we start developing these awesome leadership trainings and leadership development programs. And with that, as time goes on, we continually build on it. And now from the first day somebody steps into the firehouse as a probationary firefighter, we're already teaching them leadership strategies, which we should be, right? We absolutely should be, because a lot of those strategies start with the self-awareness, where you're at, and then building on that confidence. Because, yeah, it's not easy. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
And I think what helps a lot, and it's part of mentoring, but if you can watch someone on a regular basis that is a good leader, that is good at giving feedback, I think that's some of the best leadership training there is. If you can watch it play out regularly. So if you've worked for a really good leader and you've watched them coach the people around you, or give you feedback, or give your coworkers feedback, or correct behavior that needs modifying, I think that's some of the best leadership training that I've gotten. And obviously you have to adapt it to your individual style, but it's confidence building when I've watched other good leaders have hard conversations with people. I'm like, man, they did such a good job having that conversation. And what can I learn from that, so that in the future, when I have to have a really, really hard conversation with someone, what can I take away from that? And I've loved some of those experiences that I've had, and tried to put those in my toolbox. Like, okay, I would like to steal that. That was great.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to do this on your own, right? If you're going to try and figure out how to lead the hard people on your own, you're going to fail. And either you're going to come off as a complete jerk, or you're going to come off as a complete pushover. And there's no in between. It's usually going to be one or the other, because there's going to be so many things you miss on trying to do this on your own. So I think that's where it comes down to having that valuable person with experience, life experience, not just on the job, but life experience, maybe a parent that has teenage, whatever the case, and have that person in your corner to kind of help you through those roadblocks and those challenging times as a leader, and how to overcome those. Because on a road by yourself, it just is so much more challenging, because you have no feedback, whether you know what you're doing is right or wrong. And a lot of times you can't take the feedback of the reaction of the people against you, because as you said in the beginning, they might not just like you, period, right? So their feedback is going to be terrible anyway. So you don't know if you're right or wrong. Some people might have a chip on their shoulder because you're in that position. So again, that feedback might not be correct. So it comes back to having that strong mentor in your life, and not taking this journey alone on developing your leadership skills. With that said, I'm always looking for a mentor out in Illinois if anybody's interested, which is hard to find. I blatantly, one time I asked somebody to be my mentor, and they laughed in my face. I was like, really? Well, you're glad it's not them. But, you need that, because it's hard to figure out on your own. Where I work, a lot of times, our organization, there's a lot of opportunities. They don't deny training. You go do whatever you want. But the challenge comes in is everything is on your own doing, right? There's this no group, this is what we have to do. You can go do whatever you want to do, and we're going to stand behind and make sure you achieve that. But then it's essentially all on your own. Your career is all on your own, which is cool in an aspect, but we need guidance and mentorship. And as you move up, you're teaching the next level, and so on and so on. So we're continually progressing the industry and building a level of confidence never seen before. Because I'm going to tell you, as we've gone around the country, we are doing terrible in terms of leadership as a whole, generally speaking. I know there's good areas, not taking away anything from anybody who's doing some really good stuff. But as a whole, the feedback we hear, the things we see, the things we've experienced, we're doing bad, and there's a lot of room for improvement. And I think some of the concepts, talking about this, having this conversation, are simple in nature, but it takes humility and being humble and getting away from the rank and this is my position, so it's this way, and all these other things that are getting in the way of developing effective leaders for the future. So it's now is the time. Now is the time to where we can really flip this script and start taking leadership training in a whole new direction to really develop people into their individuality and bring it into our industry, which we desperately need.
Yeah, it's interesting in the fire service is I think we're really willing to internally train and promote topics that we're competent in because it's stuff we're good at. So like it's very objective stuff. So like source comping training or like a new forcible entry technique or whatever. Like we're really good at pushing that stuff internally. But when it comes to leadership, it's almost like everyone is second guessing themselves so much. They're like, I couldn't possibly teach leadership to my department, or I couldn't possibly, or like, oh no, that's not something you just have to figure that out. Like you said, like that's just something you have to figure out on your own. We're not going to teach that here. Go take some classes somewhere. And like you said, we'll support you and good luck, but we're not going to offer anything here that mimics the culture of our organization or sets the leadership expectations, because there has to be leadership expectations in your agency or in your department. It's just very interesting. I know very few places that are like, they may have officer in service, but it's usually some outside leadership person, or it's not leadership. It's management stuff.
Yeah.
This is the paperwork. This is the process. This is a procedure, whatever.
Yeah. It's so much. I mean, Carrie, you hit it. I love how you put that. It's the black and white that we're very good at training, but the stuff that has this stuff around it that can go any direction, that is not a clear, logical, like this is the answer to effective leadership. That's tough. That's tough in our industry. And you said it in a fantastic way. And it's, you can even connect that over, maybe a little soapbox time. We got plenty of time, even into the mental health arena, right? Why do we struggle with developing mental health programs in our industry? Because it's not a clear black and white, this is the answer. There is so many different directions it can go. And because of that, in my opinion, we're not doing what we should be doing to reduce, the mental health issues that we're seeing in our industry. So it's kind of like parallels when we look at the things that aren't so clear, aren't so dictated in policy and procedure, that require some critical thinking, some emotion behind it, some empathy and compassion. Those things that we need in our industry is just the areas that we are not doing very well.
Yeah, it's interesting, the mental health stuff, because when fire departments first started to try to figure out mental health stuff, it was like, okay, make a policy and make a procedure. Yeah. It's like step 1,
right.
Bad call. You should do this. Step 2, everyone goes to a debriefing. Step 3, it's like, no, time.
Right.
It can't work. And it didn't work. Right. It didn't work. We all did it. Like, make a peer team. We did that.
Yeah.
But it's still, I mean, people felt good that they were being checked on, and there was this sense of at least there's something and something's being done. EAPs being used more, but is it the end all solution? No, absolutely not, because it's so individualized, and it really has to depend on what's going on and getting someone lined up with the right provider and just all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. So, but we really wanted to make a step-by-step, thou shalt do this.
Right.
And then it'll fix it all.
Yeah,
it'll all
then
be
we're
better.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hits it right on the head for sure. So we're talking about someone hard to lead. So now what about somebody being too intimidating to lead? So do we want to look at that kind of from being that person, like you're how to be a good follower, like you're too intimidating to lead, so how do you not be intimidating?
Well, even before that, you said something earlier that I think we should reiterate. And those folks that are sometimes difficult to lead, they're intimidating. It's so important to point out that you're not going to get through to everybody. And sometimes it's just a matter of, it needs to be said, and this is the expectation. You can like it, not like it, agree with it, not agree with it, but this is what I'm telling you is going to happen. And you can come on board or not come on board. And that feedback you get back from them is not always going to be positive. Right. And it's just, I think that's important when we're talking about someone difficult to lead or that's an intimidating person to lead, is you're not always going to win them over. Mm-hmm. But sometimes stuff just has to be said. And you say it the best way you can, and you try to say it in a way that, like, I would really like people to always come on board with whatever I'm trying to tell them, but I have to know that and be okay with and comfortable with. Sometimes you just got to, this is the end of the conversation and we're walking away and we're done with that. So now, yeah, I think how to know, are you that person? Like, are you that person? Like, they're not listening to this podcast.
Yeah, right. Well, I generally speaking, I think people who need leadership training the most are not listening to the podcast either, right? But for me personally, I like to hit on this because, my wife and maybe some other people have come up to me saying that I come off as intimidating. And I'm like, initially blown away by this, like how, like what, like I don't get it. But it takes you back to realize, that you have this perception of who you are, but that perception of who you are in your own mind is so different than the people around you. And it's interesting. So it's almost like if you're in that leadership role, go ask your people, am I intimidating? Go ask them, see what they're going to say. See their initial body language, because that'll tell you the answer right away. But I've been told that, and I'm like, how do I fix that? Like, I don't know. Sometimes, like, going into news situations, I'll just put a fake smile on my face because I'm like, I don't know what to do. It's a very interesting place to be in, and yeah, I don't know that answer to be how to be less intimidating, but when we look at, like, how do you be a good follower? And I think I think in order to be an effective leader, at one point in your life, you need to be a good follower. Like, take orders, listen to the people that were ahead of you. But again, those people have to be good at what they were doing as well. You don't want to be listening to people who are going to steer you down the wrong path either. So, I mean, that comes into play a little bit. But being a good follower, I think this is a very important role for those senior, like, blue shirts. Like, you have a lot of influence here, like how to be a good follower, because you are probably looked at the most from the junior firefighters in your organization, at least in most organizations. They're looking at that senior firefighter, that senior blue shirt who's been there forever, that half the people are asking to retire, right? But has all the answers to everything. Like, that is an opportunity in an area to really grow junior firefighters and teach them the pluses of being a good follower, especially in those times when you don't agree, but yet it is the way it is. And this is why we have to do it, and explain the structure of the industry, and explain how promotions work and how people are different. Like, it's just such a value, I think barn boss might be the term some places use. It's just such a valuable position that can really influence, I think, the most how to be an effective follower within the fire service specifically.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, some of our stations, some of our captains are really good at promoting, not promoting like officially, but like putting into place a senior man or a senior guy, senior girl, whatever it is, so that the folks, that's the go-to between the supervisor and the firefighters. They go to the senior person first, and the senior person learns, starts learning some leadership stuff. They really get in the weeds of department policies and procedures, and they kind of are guiding people. And I think that's a great mentoring method. I love the stations here that do that. And it really, really develops those folks a ton. And I think for me, one of the things I catch myself, and I know it makes me sometimes a bad follower, is when someone comes with negative feedback for me, I'm not always great at just shutting up, because I always want to kind of say, well, this is why I did what I did, or like trying to rationalize, or like give my decision-making process, where sometimes that's not appropriate. Sometimes to be a good follower, you just go, yep, you're right. I'll do better next time. And thank you for feeling comfortable and telling me, instead of me trying to give excuses, which to me don't feel like excuses. It's, hey, let me tell you my thought process, because maybe other people are thinking the same way and making the same mistake because of this is why I was thinking about it this way. I just need to be, more humble and just say, yep, I'll do better next time. Because I think there's a time and a place for both of those. But for me, I'm not always great at just shutting up, taking feedback. My supervisors, past and present, are probably going, "Yep, yep."
Well, I think you bring a great point. The personalities that go into this industry, a lot of alpha type personalities, and everybody wants the last word. Well, if you're going to be a follower, you don't get a last word. Just shut your mouth, right? And
Yeah.
it's for a purpose. It's that self-awareness. Why is this somebody saying this to me? Take it with open arms. And how can you use that feedback for you? Whether you agree with it or not, and I think a lot of times when feedback is given, the defenses just go up immediately,
Yeah.
like immediately. And it's like, hold on a second. Like, this isn't, you don't need to get defensive. This is here to help. Like, and it might not be the nicest thing to say, but like, I'm here to help you. And I wish, somebody came before me and would pick out all my shortfalls and say, you need to work on this. You need to work on this. I think, but that's a cultural thing where we have to just change this mentality in our industry in terms of what feedback looks like and the purpose behind it. It's not to call you out. It's not to shame you or utilize fear. But I think in our culture, like, that's where the mind goes for junior people, like shame and fear and you're not good enough. And so we have to change this whole thing of how we're doing things, how we're leading people, and how we're promoting leadership and progressing it through the stages of one's career. Because like I said, we're not hitting the mark on that. And it's just, everything is just cyclical, right? People want the old way back and they want this stuff back. And it's like, no, like that's so wrong. So it's, for me, it's when we look at, someone being hard to lead or intimidating the lead, it's like this much bigger, I don't even want to say problem, right? It's this bigger opportunity that we can face if we so choose to at an organizational level to be able to go in and develop something to where we're constantly developing leaders, right? And it's not going to be black and white. It's going to be messy. It's going to have successes and failures. You're going to fail if if there's a fire chief out there listening to us and you implement this, you're going to fail at this, right? But you're going to keep going because you know the end goal. And so you can't be afraid of all that. You can't be afraid of the journey. And I think a lot of times in life, not just in the fire service, we're so scared of the journey of from getting from point A to point B. Like, we always think of that end result. Like, how do we get here? And I just want to be there, like right now, and there's this whole journey in between of ups and downs, of hardships and successes that we need to endure before we get to that final kind of resting space of having an effective leadership program or whatever the case may be, or an effective mental health program. There's just a lot of growing pains, and who's willing to take that ride. But again, the words like humble and humility need to come into place. And, it's just our culture just does not foster those types of characteristics. And that's what we need to change.
Yeah, so much is changing in the leadership culture across so many industries, and it's getting there. I think it's getting there slowly. But another thing I want to bring up, and this is so different. And I mean, I might get like burned at the stake for this, but so we've been doing live fire training, and so I've seen all the crews, all the companies come through, and we had a couple scenarios. So we're kind of newer to announcing our mode of operation. Like, we haven't always said that like out loud. The first arriving engine declares a mode of operation. So you can be in rescue mode, fire attack mode, defensive mode, all that jazz. So if you are in rescue mode, then obviously you can abandon 2 in, 2 out, which we call IRET. And so it's assumed if you're in rescue mode, no IRET has been established. If you're in fire attack mode, IRET needs to be established. And so there was a couple scenarios where the captain or the acting captain missed some radio traffic. And so we would kind of set them up to make the decision. Are they going to go in rescue mode or fire attack mode as they pull up to the building? And the dispatcher would say, this is called in by the occupant who is trapped inside her home. It's on fire. So obviously you're going to be in rescue mode. Well, they miss the traffic. They mark on scene in fire attack mode, and they put IRET in service. They literally leave 2 people outside, and they go in. And so we come out and we debrief, and we're like, why'd you do that? And they're like, oh, I must have missed that radio traffic. And so the battalion of this crew asks everybody on the crew, did you hear it? Yep, I heard it. Did you hear it? Yep, I heard it. Did you hear it? Yep, I heard it. And so this whole time, we all preach that on a fire scene, it's very authoritarian. You don't question, and that's been the culture of the fire service, right? You don't question your captain. And now it's like, yeah, you should say something there. You should say something like, hey, Cap, you hear that radio traffic? Are you sure you want us out here on IRIT? I think that's it. And I think culturally that is starting to change as well, where, we're not having meetings and discussions in the front yard about 10 minutes long, but I think it's starting to change where people need to be comfortable if they know information that could change the way this plays out. And so I just wanted to bring that up too, that we always say there's not room for this on the fire ground, but I think sometimes there is room for a little bit of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well put. And you mentioned how we're starting to see, better leadership training and maybe stuff in the corporate world, and things are changing over time. So over the last couple months, I started this part-time opportunity, a few hours a week doing disaster preparedness for a big hospital system out by me. And one of the interesting things for me, really, stepping into the corporate world, like, first of all, whoa. So different. Very interesting. Yeah, I've never been in that type of environment. So they're learning a lot for sure. However, they are very involved in the growth of their employees, which is interesting to see. And they have many different type of professional development groups. I do belong to one of these groups, and they do monthly meetings, and they bring different topics on, and they bring, high level leaders within this hospital system to come talk, like high level leaders, VPs and CEOs, CNOs, things like that. So it's people who've been around and stuff. So this last one, I mean, this is crazy, right? They talked about self-awareness and introspection. I'm like, wait a second, this is crazy. And you're like, cool, you're seeing it. It's cool to see outside of what me and you talk about, because it's a rarity to actually see. And that's what they're talking to the people that are, younger professionals that want to move up the corporate ladder. And they're doing this already. It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, obviously sitting through something like that, I was a little more critical, because I'm like, all right, where are they at? Because me and you talk about it. They did a great job, I think, but again, it's scratching the surface, because I think a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, and even in terms of, how do we lead someone that's hard or intimidating, all that stuff, it's challenging because it could get very personal very quickly, right? And it has a tendency to come off as negative when it's not. And defenses go up, and then it becomes an us versus them, and stuff like that. And it's not meant to, but it's got to have this open-mindedness on both ends, right? Because like I said, sitting through that training, they just scratch the surface, but you can almost see the apprehension to want to go deeper because of what that could bring for some people, right? Or the potential of what it could bring in terms of people getting defensive, or, not me type thing. And it's like, no, we're looking at this from a much broader picture, right? We're using a broad brush here. We're not pointing any fingers here when Carrie and I talk. It's just keeping it broad to look at things from a different level. Pull yourself out of your current environment and look at it differently, assess yourself differently than you ever have in the past. Ask yourself different questions than you've ever asked in the past. And that's going to help you develop into the leader that can lead the hard people. And if you're an intimidating type person, how to start looking at that. So it's really getting on these deeper levels of how do we improve as human beings, and then and how does that translate into the workforce as well? There's just so much here,
Yeah, I would like somebody to make a class called "Why Do I Take This So Personally?" Because I find myself sometimes some feedback, I'm like, oh, yep, thank you for pointing that out. I can correct that. But some feedback, man, I take it so personal. I'm like, what childhood issue or what has happened in my early professional career that is making this sting so bad? And why am I so butthurt about this? So somebody, well, it's probably not a class. It's just my therapist who just needs to help me unpack that.
Yeah, I think that is very, yeah, that is just a great point. Well, how do we take things so personally? It's interesting, kind of opposite sides of the spectrum here, because a lot of times, I want feedback that I don't get. Like, I just have no idea, and the way just in our organization, how things have always gone, it's just, you're in the next position because you tested well, boom, go, and sure, every firehouse, there's a lot of talking behind your back, right? But like, where's the feedback? Like, give me something. I don't care what it is. Like, I want to know. And then I want to know how you're going to help me.
Yeah.
Right. So it's taking that approach to where we have a vested interest in somebody. And I think it might be part of the problem, right? People don't feel like they have a vested interest in their leaders' lives on a professional level. Like, if you know you have a vested interest, if you're a leader and you have a vested interest in your people and they know it, right? They know that you're vested in them. Then maybe when you come with feedback, they will never take it personally because they know that vested interest. They know that you're there for them. But if you don't have that vested interest, right? And you come with that same exact feedback, boom, hold on. Why you attacking me? Hold on. Like, where's this coming from? And then you start questioning it. So it's about building relationships as well. And how do we build those relationships to where we can effectively lead? People don't become intimidating. People will listen to us. They want to listen to us. They want our feedback. And like, then the sky's the limit here. Like, it's just so crazy. Like that, how I look at some of this stuff and the experiences that you've had, I've had, and just like how simple in concept a lot of this stuff is. And it's like, it's right here. Like, it's for the taking, and any organization can do it at any time and really start affecting some huge positive change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been amazing as always.
As always. It's so crazy. I wish like our listeners, once pretty soon we're going to be getting set up on YouTube, so you'll actually be able to see us. But until that gets going, maybe we should bring them in before we start recording, like one day, like a behind the scenes.
No, that's so like the Wizard of Oz unveil. Like, no.
So they could see, like, yeah, we just got on the phone 5 minutes ago. We decided what we're going to talk about, and then bam, like it ends up just being so good. I think, at least
more genuine for sure.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, everyone, I hope you have a fabulous week. And if you have topics you want us to talk about, shoot us an email or find us on social and send us a message. And we'd be happy to chat about your topic if it's something we know anything about. Or even if it's not, sometimes we just shot the dark.
We'll wing it.
We'll wing it. Yep. So, all right. Until next time.
We'll see you. As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
And Carrie
from the Heat of Command podcast.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.